This next build has been in the making for me for 7 years. Just getting to it. A slab flattening jig. I've got 4 different projects I want to do with these 2 slabs, but before I get to any of that, I have to get them perfectly flat. Okay, I want to tell you a little story about some wood that a friend of mine and I harvested off of a job in 2018. I had to look it up. We were working at a substation on the side of a mountain, and there was some crews that had cleared some trees. They felled it and they let it sit there. And we looked at it, and it was this log that it must have been, I don't know how old it is, but it's a red oak, and red oaks take a long time to grow. And this thing was like at the base where it widens out, it was well over 36 inches. In fact, the pieces that I have are 30 inches, just about, and that's because he couldn't fit it in his mill. He actually had to cut it to make it fit. So the pieces are 30 inches pretty much the entire way. And it was over 36 at the base initially. It was so heavy, the equipment that we had on site could barely pick it up. It had to be stung all the way in to move the thing. It was so heavy that when we brought it over to the portable mill, it's called a, what's it called? A wood miser. This guy's wood miser. The hydraulic jacks on that thing would not pick it up. He had to tandem lift the thing with the wood miser jacks and a bobcat to be able to put the thing on the mill. And then he had to like trim it to be able to fit the thing in the actual mill to mill it. Now, I don't want to buy a slab flattening jig. Those are $1,000 or $300-400. I have plenty of materials to make a slab flattening jig. I have the router, and I have steel or aluminum, so I can build it. All right, so there's a couple of things on this slab jig that I want to make sure are good to go. Most of the materials that I'm using are way overkill, so I'm not too worried, but when you're building it, picking through your materials to build this thing, think this through. Number one, is it going to flex when you're running your router across the table? The stuff I have, not going to flex. I think it's 1/4 inch by 2 by 4, so it's plenty rigid. I am spanning quite a ways, so that makes a difference, but I don't think it's anything to be concerned with for me. Second thing, how do we stop it from sliding? When you're running the router, is it gonna push your cross member piece off? So I think to connect my cross member piece, I'm gonna take a piece of the angle and I'm gonna face it down, and that's gonna wrap around the back side of my straight edges that are gonna be running lengthwise. Mike from the future here. That was a little bit of a design flaw. I'll talk about it towards the end, but I should have added one more thing there on that little downside. You'll see. The next problem that I'm gonna come into is that the long pieces that I'm using are too tall to be able to just reach the slab. I need to build the slab up now to reach the router, because the router bit is gonna be floating something like 2.5-3 inches too high to be able to do any kind of flattening that I wanna do. So I'm gonna have to build that sucker up and meet it. Most people don't have aluminum, but I have a lot of it and I love using it because you can cut it with a regular saw blade. The design of this cross piece you could easily make out of wood, like plywood, if you didn't have aluminum, which no one does. I'm the only one that does. Red oak for me has been around in my whole life, in furniture, in my whole life. And it's near and dear to me. All of the antique furniture that's at my father's house, that's red oak. The things that are still around inside after my kids have broken every single piece of furniture in my house, the only things that have survived, red oak. That's literally it. No joke. All right, the table's ready to go. Next thing I need to do is figure out what pieces of this slab I want to take for the coffee table and for the end table. So let's look at it. I decided to use the end of this slab for the end table because it has this really cool wood grain and wood checking right in the center of it. I think it's going to look really good as like a centerpiece for the end table. See that long pencil line? One on each side of it, basically. One thing I'm realizing I didn't show very well in the video is that both of my work tables you see here are perfectly flat with each other. Both lengthwise and widthwise, this is a flat, level table. Mike from the future here. Don't use that much glue. It was way too much glue. A little dab on the very outside edge of the slab, more than enough to hold the slab. Don't put any underneath it, you'll regret it. In case you're wondering about this little hoist I keep using, I got this at Harbor Freight. Cheap money, and then I bought a little trolley kit and fabricated it to fit on this beam in the garage. It's fantastic, as long as I remember that I have it. Mike from the future! So what I ended up doing here, you'll see, is that I have about a 1/4 inch gap there. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna create some shims, and I'm gonna wedge that thing so it's sitting this way, 1/4 inch on one side and tight on the other. I'm gonna shim up the tight side so that that gap decreases by half to an 1/8 inch. Then I'm gonna flatten the whole thing. That'll give me my maximum thickness on the slab. Okay, here's what I'm gonna be using today. I'm gonna try two different routers for this. This is a friend of mine's and this is my own personal router. I kind of want to try both. One, because everything in my life is a competition. And two, I really am curious to see if the full size extra beef of this router is gonna help with the slab flattening. It should, honestly. Let's talk about the two models. This is a Bosch 15 amp 2.3 horsepower. It's got a lot of little extra bells and whistles, but essentially it's the same thing as that Bosch with the two wooden knobs that you use, okay? It's middle of the road. This is a Porter cable circa like 1990, all right? Zero bells and whistles, although it is adjustable variable speed, but it has no trigger on the handle. I don't know if it has slow start or not. Just a big fat on-off switch on the top there. That doesn't feel like 1990s. I don't know what is. Things that are going for it. It's 3.25 horsepower. So it has a whole extra pony in this sucker. The question is it going to push through this oak a third better? I'm not sure. I looked on eBay to buy this. It's like 500 bucks. I don't know if you can get better deals or not on eBay, of course. To buy this new from the depot with a full kit, it's about 300 bucks. And that comes with a plunge base. So this one's pretty enticing if you're gonna spend the money. But if you're only flattening slabs, this sucker might be the one for you. So let's see which one is really gonna work out for this application. Now the bits that I have today are two different 2-inch slab flattening bits. One from Yonico, which I'm pretty sure I got this at Home Depot, and then one is a no-name knockoff brand from Amazon. Now the no-name knockoff has not the greatest edge. And when I look at the profile, it's not quite as steep as the Yonico. The Yonico seems like the edge catches my finger just a bit more. I'm wondering if that's gonna help me or hurt me. This is very hard stuff. This is red oak. We're gonna see which one works better. I'm gonna run both of them in each router just so we can compare. All the staining you see there is mouse urine because this sat outside covered for 5 years. I'm hoping routering all this out will get rid of those stains. Spoiler alert, it does. Sixteenth isn't quite enough. I think I'm gonna go to an 1/8 inch and risk it. Risk it all. And that was a mistake. By the way, 16th is really the max you should do, at least for that cheaper Amazon bit. As soon as I went to 1/8 inch, it started to bog down and I could cut less and less of that 2-inch to the point where I could only get a 3/8 inch pass on that thing with my smaller router. Angle. I could tell immediately that the extra horsepower made all the difference. Even with the Amazon bit that I had already started to burn out, it would still push through the wood much easier. Granted, I did not go back to 1/8 of an inch because that was definitely too much. You can see there's two little low spots on the bottom of this coffee table slab, but it doesn't matter to me because it's on the bottom. For the first initial cuts, I use my burnt out Amazon bit. Then for my final pass, I use my Home Depot bit. All right, so you can tell here, if I show you this, the shadows that I think I burned in when I was running the bit through, they clear up after a bit of sanding. So I'm just gonna keep sanding. I'm gonna sand and sand and sand until I can't stand it anymore. That's the name of the game when it comes to woodworking. Here we go. Time lapse. I decided to put both of my slab pieces I flattened up inside the room they're going to live in so they can stay flat and acclimate to where they're going to live forever. All right, we're going to talk about this project now. What could I have done differently? What worked out? How much did it cost me? All that stuff. First, let's talk about what it cost. Because I already had a router, I actually had multiple routers at my disposal. The only major cost for me was the router bits. One that I had bought like 7 years ago because I knew I wanted to do this project for a while now. And then another one I bought maybe a year or two ago because I thought I had lost the other one, ironically. So I spent about 75 bucks in bits. $25 for the first bit, $50 for the Home Depot bit, the yellow one, the Yonico. And let's assume that you're going to have some sort of rough materials on hand, either steel. I had aluminum, so I just used aluminum, or wood. You could use wood. You just have to make sure you have a straight edge, because whatever the edges you put on is the edge you're going to get off the table. So make sure it's straight. Cut it with the saw. Give it a good eyeball. Honestly, you don't even have to do this setup. The first picnic table that I made, I didn't have any of this stuff for that. I just used the hand planer and my belt sander, and I did my best, and then I just sort of leveled them to make it work. So it's not the end of the world. So let's talk design now. So I built this oversized because I was planning on being able to use this exact setup for a 36-inch dining room table. I'm realizing now this build was the max that this setup can hold. So if you're gonna build something, the workable area, you want to be about 12 inches bigger lengthwise and widthwise than whatever you're going to work with. And that gives you 6 inches of clearance on each side to let the router clear the workpiece and then spin freely. If you bring the router to the edge and it's still sitting on the wood, you're going to get a nice big burn mark in the shape of a circle on your slab. Using the spacers like I did actually worked out in my favor because they built the workpiece up off of the floor. So when I had to flip the thing, I didn't have to worry too much to make sure there was zero debris underneath it. So that worked out. The only thing I would add differently to the spacers is I would add different levels or thicknesses of spacers so that I could get that slab as close to my truss span as I could. Yeah. Improvements. The biggest improvement that I could do to this setup that you should do to your setup is give yourself some sort of way to make that truss, I'm calling it a truss, I don't know what I should call it, to make that truss slide laterally better left and right. I was shimmying the thing for 2 days straight, was driving me nuts. But you know, once you're in a project, you don't want to stop to fix it. You just want to keep going in misery. So that's what I did for like 48 hours. If you're going to build one, those end stops that I have to keep the truss from sliding off forward or backward, those end stops should have needed a piece of MDF like I did underneath the router to allow it to slide laterally. That's the one biggest downside to this. That, or maybe some handles, something to help you slide it left to right. I'm spitting. Overall, the slabs look really good. Time-wise, I spent 1 day building it, roughly, and then 2 days sort of mapping out what pieces I want and flattening them. Ultimately, I flattened 3 separate projects in a total of 3 working days. So just figure 1 day per project. Next thing to do for these suckers is we're gonna finish the slabs. We're gonna weld some table legs. Lastly, we're gonna do a little bit of laser cutting. I'm gonna try to cut a chessboard into the side table. So looking forward to that. It's a couple of videos down the road. It's been good. It's been fun. I'll see you next week or 2 weeks. I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye.